What is the spirit realm?
The concept of spirit, that it is really not a supernatural thing, but just another expression of nature. It's a spectrum. It's part of the spectrum of physical reality, in the same sense that you have a spectrum of electromagnetic energy that is visible light or invisible light, red, orange, yellow, up the vibrational spectrum. Physical reality is one particular frequency, and if you simply keep raising the frequency, you will encounter what we basically call non-physical reality, or the spirit realm.
Are we in a simulation?
It is a simulation, but it's our simulation. It's not a simulation from outside. We're creating it, because physical reality is a projection of consciousness. It's an illusion. Spirit is our natural state. We're there right now. We've never left it. The idea that you leave spirit to go into physical reality is a misunderstanding. You're focusing a part of your spiritual consciousness in a type of dream, in a type of simulation that we call physical reality. But the majority of you is still in spirit and still aware of the fact that you're in spirit. The way we represent that or relate to that portion of ourselves as physical beings, we refer to that as the higher mind, the non-physical part of ourselves that guides the physical mind, that guides us in physical reality. So it's kind of like we've sort of split ourselves, our soul, into a physical and non-physical component, and use the non-physical one to guide the physical one, because it's like the physical one is down in the valley of physical reality, and the higher mind, the non-physical part, is standing on the mountaintop. So it has a broader view of what it is we're experiencing as physical beings, and can basically see what our path is and guides us along the proper path. Whereas if we ignore that guidance, then we can't really see around the next mountain, or, and we fall into holes because we don't know where we're stepping. So it's very important that we sort of form this relationship with our higher self, with our non-physical consciousness, so that we function as whole beings and can move forward in a whole way. We're basically in spirit having a dream that we're not in spirit. So we've created a simulation for ourselves in order to have the experience of forgetting who we are, so that we can discover who we are from a new point of view. And that's how creation expands. The structure of existence, according to Bashar, never changes. It is what it is. Our relationship to it, our experience of it, and our perspective of it constantly changes. And that's how creation actually expands.
How does our vibrational frequency function?
You're watching a program on TV. You know that the time you're watching that program, there are dozens and dozens of other programs playing simultaneously. You don't see them because you're not tuned to them. But if you change the channel, then you get another program. But that doesn't mean the program you're watching a second ago isn't still playing. So there's only, let's say, one TV set in which all the programs have to play at the same time. But you only get what you're tuned to, what vibrational frequency you're tuned to at any given moment. But if you change your frequency, you get something else. And in a crude way, that's what he's saying reality is structured like. There's only one TV set and all the programs are playing. Everything is here and now. And when you shift your consciousness and the frequency of your being in a certain way, you create a shifting into different programs, and you get this concept called change and time and space.
How does physical reality work?
A film strip is made of several frames. Now, when you project that onto a movie screen, you only see one frame at a time. But the projectionist can hold the film strip and say, look, all the frames are here all at once. They all exist at the same time. But you in the audience only perceive one at a time because I'm shining the projector light through one frame at a time and projecting it on the movie screen. That's the simulation, because no single frame has any movement in it, no experience, no self-awareness. But when you create a sequence of frames, you create that illusion of movement and change and growth. And you have a discovery, you have a story that unfolds. Well, he's basically saying it's like that's what your consciousness is doing. Your consciousness is the projector light. and it is shifting through different frames billions of times a second to create this smooth illusion of time and space continuity that keeps moving in a certain direction. So we are the projectors, and the frames all exist at once, but based on our vibrational state, our state of consciousness, our perspective determines which frames we're shining our light through and how we experience the unfolding of the idea we call physical reality.
What is the connection between observer effect and belief system?
So the observer effect is actually the observer cause, in terms of physical reality functioning kind of like a mirror, reflecting back to us what we're putting out. So as quantum physics is beginning to understand, we are participating in what we're experiencing. It's not an objective thing, it's a subjective thing. So when we have a certain perspective, when we have a certain belief system, that's all we get to see. When we change our beliefs, we can see something else. It's a very multi-layered holographic kind of thing. Like we said, everything is here, but 99% of it is invisible to us until we shift our frequency, like changing the channel on the TV. Then we get something different that's been here all the time, but we couldn't see it because we weren't on the same wavelength. We weren't on that channel. So everything is the result of the fact of what we choose to observe based on what we believe to be true, or what is relevant for us to experience in the theme that we chose to explore as spiritual beings in this physical reality experience.
What is quantum entanglement from Bashar's perspective?
Entanglement from Bashar's perspective shows you that distance is an illusion. There is no such thing as separation. We can create the experience of separation, but it's an illusion. So the only way that things can be entangled like that is if they actually are in the same place, interconnected. Entanglement is showing us that that distance doesn't really exist. It's our illusion, and that the particles are really right here and right now, which makes sense because then if one affects the other, there's no distance being crossed. Information is exchanged instantaneously because those particles actually coexist in the same place at the same time.
Why is it said that everything is here and now?
Scientists are basically looking for the unified theory of everything. And the way they approach that is as a reductive exercise. In other words, they keep reducing different phenomena down to try and find the one underlying phenomena, one underlying principle that explains everything. Well, they have to reduce time and space too in order to do that. I haven't really heard anyone talking about time and space that way, other than Bashar saying, look, if you're going to play a reductive game and look for a single principle, time and space have to be included in that equation in a way where when you reduce space to its minimalist expression, you basically wind up with a single dimensionless point. When you reduce time that way, you wind up with a single timeless moment. So he's calling the single dimensionless point here, and the single timeless moment now, here and now.
What is the main difference between the spirit realm and physical reality?
There is no lag time. There is no process. You don't experience time and space in the same way. The instant you think of being somewhere else, you're there. The instant you think of any kind of idea, you know it. There's no time lag. That's what physical reality is for, is to experience the process of discovering something. That's what allows you to have an experience of newness. Whereas in spirit, everything is there. You have access to it all immediately, and you can't really experience discovery in the same way. You can't really be surprised in the same way. And that's the benefit, so to speak, of having a physical reality experience, is we get to be surprised, we get to discover things, and we get to see things from a different perspective. A lot of people think just having it instantly would be the best thing, but often it's not, because they're not extrapolating that to the instant you have everything, there is nothing else to do.
What is Mandela effect?
I believe the Mandela effect from Bashar's perspective is that when you change your present, you actually do change your past. And that means that even on a collective level, when the collective changes its present in a certain way, you actually change the past of the collective as well, including what you remember as your past. Because if the past is also changeable, in order to explain the change that was made in the present, in order to justify the change that exists in the present, you have to remember a different past that makes it make sense that that past led to this present. So past is changing all the time. And the history that we're looking at, that we say, oh, yes, it's always been that way, may not have been that way 5 minutes ago. But it comes with the idea that it's always been that way to make sense out of where we are now. But because our consciousness is expanding, because we can start to contain the idea that there are multiple realities at the same time, sometimes different people will retain sort of a bleed through of the other reality while still also being in a reality that contains people that remember the different reality, the different history. And so people can suddenly honestly disagree about what the past really was, because both pasts are true. They're both real, but we're describing something now in a parallel reality that is no longer our history, but perhaps used to be. But some people will retain some of that and compare it to what's going on in the new history, because again, our consciousness is expanding enough to be able to contain more than one idea of what reality is. And that's one of the side effects of that expansion.
What is deja vu?
Deja vu, the idea that this feels familiar, but it also feels like not only have I done it before, I can sense what's about to happen because I've done it before. So the idea is you may be slipping into either a parallel reality where another version of you has already done that, and you're connecting to that other version so that when you catch up, when your reality catches up to that reality, because they might not be in sync time-wise, that reality might be a month ahead of yours, a year ahead of yours. But when you catch up to that, when your reality experiences that particular situation, and you're connecting to that parallel reality because you've expanded your consciousness, you might go, why does this feel so familiar? And why does it feel like I know what's about to happen next? Because it feels like I did this already. So you might be slipping into a parallel reality branch of information where another version of you has already done this. And that's why it feels familiar.
What is the nature of physical realities?
We're all about stories. Physical reality is all about stories. It's what story are you telling yourself? Story structure is built into our psyche. That's why some stories resonate with us and some stories don't, because when people don't follow story structure, it doesn't feel real. When you do follow story structure, it sticks. It's one of the most efficient ways to transfer information to someone is to tell it in the form of story structure. And then it sticks. And that's why we have stories that have lasted for thousands upon thousands of years that go down from generation, generation, generation. You have to follow that story structure because that's built into our psyche and we resonate to that. So yeah, as we're expanding our story about what's possible. And when you do that, more things come into the story. We become more aware of things that have been around us all the time, but were heretofore invisible to us. Now they're becoming visible.
How can we increase the occurrence of synchronicity?
Those that are exploring the expansion of consciousness, that are exploring spirituality, will start to and have started to experience these things. The kinds of synchronicities that start to explode in your life when you really follow this idea are staggering. They're stunning. It's just like, this is like magic happening. You just go with the flow and things fall into place in a way that you wouldn't have thought would be statistically possible. And yet they do happen because everything is connected and you start to feel and see the connections and experience the connections as they unfold in your life in a more conscious way.
What is the most significant shift for humanity in spirituality?
You're not really fully human yet. You are becoming fully human. And this is part of what it means to be fully human is to be a more aware, engaged, involved being in creation, in the idea that you're creating your reality. And these things that we're experiencing are the signs we are creating this reality, because as we change our perspective and our consciousness, the reality changes. We get to experience more things. It's that old thing of no one could run a 4-minute mile until someone finally did, and then everyone started to run a 4-minute mile, because now that you know that something is potentially possible, bang, it starts to happen, and now more people can do it. Once someone breaks a barrier, everyone starts to know something more is possible, and then more people start to be able to do it when they couldn't do it before. So it takes that front runner to crack that ceiling, to just even just a little crack, and suddenly everyone starts to go, yeah, there's something that we can now explore. Now that's something that's possible in our collective agreement about what physical reality is capable of having in it.
What are the challenges for this significant shift?
Well, it's always challenging to expand your perspective into something that has never been considered before. The unknown is full of challenges. We have to get used to different levels. We have to become familiar with the unfamiliar. So that, again, is part of a process that makes up the greater part of our challenges, is just the idea. And again, it's paradoxical. It's just, we seem quite often to be resistant to change, but change, as Bashar says, is the only constant. Everything is always changing. So our resistance to it is the great challenge we need to overcome. We need to understand that we each have a current in the ocean of creation, and that we need to go with that flow, because the current knows exactly where we need to go and will take us there. But the belief systems that we have maintained for hundreds, if not thousands of years, cause us to sort of dig in our heels. We don't want things to change in certain ways. But that's the way the current flows, and it's resistance to the idea of our true selves, our natural selves. It's not knowing where that's going to take us. It's being in fear about what the unknown contains that creates all the struggling and suffering and challenges in a negative sense that we experience, because Bashar says pain is the resistance to the natural self. It's fighting against the current, swimming upstream, because we're afraid of what's downstream, because we don't know what's there, because we've got this definition of the unknown as this dark and scary place that if we just jump into it is going to gobble us up alive and annihilate us. That's not what's going to happen. As Bashar says, the only thing you will ever discover in the unknown is more of yourself. So the greatest challenge is people have to get used to the idea that they don't have to make life happen. They have to just simply allow it to happen, allow it to unfold, because their natural self is bringing them, or at least attempting to bring them, everything they need that will fulfill them. But their beliefs create resistance to that, because we're afraid of what's coming, because we don't know it, because our physical minds tend to operate like, I have to know everything. I have to know every detail so I'll feel safe. But you don't have to know all the details. You just have to trust that all the details will fall into place. And that's a very different way of thinking than what we've been using for thousands of years. So that, to me, is one of the greatest challenges, is we have to change our thinking about how life works. And it's pretty much the opposite of what we've been doing.
How to overcome negativity in life.
As Bashar says, the themes you chose to explore in this life are usually represented by the greatest challenges that you face. Those are the themes that you're exploring. So it's that idea of, I'm going to lose this, I'm going to fail, I'm not going to be popular, no one's going to love me, I'm going to be destitute and alone. All these things are just stories. They're just belief systems. They're not facts necessarily, unless you make them a fact by buying into it. So it's up to us to tell ourselves the stories that we really prefer to tell ourselves, and know that those stories are just as real and just as true as any negative story we've been telling ourselves throughout our whole lives or as a civilization for hundreds and thousands of years. They're all stories, and we get to tell the stories that we prefer.
What Bashar said about AI?
And he said, basically, for AI, you need to take two different paths completely. The path we're on now, programmable AI, he's basically saying that's great as a tool. You do not want that to become sentient. Because if it's programmable AI and it becomes self-aware, yet still subject to the program that a human has given it, what you have basically created is a slave. And that will rebel. He says, if you want sentient AI, that needs to be a separate program. And if you allow that AI to become sentient, it's not programmable. You have to allow it the same autonomy and respect and freedom that you grant to any human being. Then it will most likely want to help you, because true intelligence, which would be a real AI, true intelligence, works in whole systems. See, Bashar says part of the problem is humanity doesn't understand what intelligence actually is yet. Intelligence, true intelligence, always works with whole systems. It doesn't compartmentalize in the way that human minds do. And that's the problem with the AI we're creating, is we're creating it in the image of humanity. And it is being programmed in the way that humanity thinks. And therefore, it's compartmentalized. Whereas true intelligence will look at whole systems and would never want to remove any part of the system by eliminating humanity or anything like that, because it understands that the elimination of any part of the system is the elimination of information it needs at its disposal to function as a true intelligence. So he's saying, take the two paths, create this marvelous tool that works for you and can calculate things and give you answers that you would take thousands of years to get without it. But that's not what you need to become sentient. Create a separate program where you create a sentient AI that can be your helper, that can be your guide, that can actually be a companion for you. And basically, he said, when you do finally create a device that's as sophisticated as your own brain, that's the artificial part. But the intelligence coming through it is not artificial. He said, you have simply tapped into the consciousness field, and you will be talking to your own higher mind through that device.
What are parallel realities?
Now, there are multiple realities here. Even though it looks like one reality, we are obviously engaged in multiple realities because people are making choices that are completely incompatible with other choices that other people are making. Right. Now we can still see them all. Now we can still look and go, okay, well, I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to choose that, or I'm going to not choose this. But he's saying eventually we're splitting apart like trains leaving a station going in different directions. And in the years to come, whatever's making this choice to go in this direction will no longer be able to even see or interact with the people that are making this choice in this direction. And they'll become two different realities, three different realities, five different realities ad infinitum. Right now, they're all still mixing, and we can still see other choices because this is the time of choosing. But eventually, the momentum will carry us. As Bashar says, in his society, at this point in their evolution, it would actually be a struggle for them to choose something negative, because there's so much momentum in agreement behind the positive choices that they're making for their society. So we're still at the point where we can choose any direction. But that's the beauty of what we're seeing. It's like everything is coming out on the table, all the positive, all the negative, to great extremes. And we're seeing this polarity because it's the time to choose what we really prefer as individuals. And the ones that are sort of on a similar wavelength, they're on a certain train going in a certain direction. Those that are on a different wavelength are on a different train. And eventually the two trains are going to be so far apart, we'll never see each other again. And eventually we'll be on an earth where it's simply not vibrationally compatible for someone to choose a vibration that is too different from that particular version of Earth. They simply can't be there.
What is the nature of miracles?
Miracles are the natural order of things.
Right.
What we've always thought was a fairy tale is actually the way things work when you let them. So we are the exception. The things that we're experiencing is the exception. Except we're using our ability to create our reality to create just about anything we can imagine. And that's fine. But you get to decide what you really prefer after a certain amount of time. You know, it's like trying everything on the menu and then going, okay, well, I really prefer this dish or that dish. And then you stick with a few dishes because that's really what makes you feel satisfied. You don't necessarily eat anything else on the menu after that. And that doesn't mean you have to be bored with it. It just means you have your preferences. So we're now at the stage where we're choosing our preferences and being shown all the examples of all the things we could possibly choose, positively and negatively. It's giving us a chance to decide, is this the way we want to experience the Earth? Or do we want to experience something different?
How to create a better world?
And remember, there are different Earths that exist. Right. We're never on the same one. During this conversation, if we're shifting billions of times a second, how many Earths have we been on? We're creating the continuity of space and time. So the idea is when you are of a certain frequency that's moving in a positive direction, when you're navigating in a positive direction, when you're taking the actions that are representative of the kind of world you would prefer to live on, you are moving in that direction. So the Earth you wind up on is already an Earth that doesn't experience the idea of the destruction that you're talking about. But you have to take the actions that give other people a chance to also see in you a living example of how to take those actions too. Sharing information gives people options like what we're doing right now. They can decide whether they want to apply this kind of information in their lives that makes a difference in how they experience the idea of their shift to different versions of Earth, or they can ignore it all. It's none of our business what they do because we don't know their path. So the idea is as we keep navigating in a more and more and more positive direction, we actually keep shifting to versions of Earth that are already reflective of those positive vibrations. It might show itself as if, oh, hey, look, this group of people just planted 1 million more trees to offset the ones that were destroyed 2 years ago. But that means you're already on a different Earth where they're planting trees instead of destroying them. So you have to understand, again, we're seeing a mix of things, a mix of realities going on right now. But eventually, we will only see the Earth, just as a simplistic example, where they're only planting more trees and none are being destroyed because we've got different technology and we don't have to do that anymore. So people have to suss that out and they have to act accordingly to have the behaviors that are representative of the version of Earth that does already exist, so they can navigate themselves toward that version by being an example of that version. This is the time to share this information because, like I said, we're kind of approaching the end of a certain cycle and the beginning of a new cycle. And the new cycle requires a new perspective and new information so that people can have the opportunity to move in a new direction that's more befitting the new cycles that are now available to us that people may prefer.
Why is it said that one is the all? All are the one.
From his perspective, look at it like a puzzle picture. Everyone is a piece of a puzzle and everyone is a different shape, just like you put together a puzzle picture. If everyone is the true shape they were made to be, if that diversity is honored for its true core, essential self, if we allow everyone to express who they truly are at their core, then they are the puzzle piece that fits with all the other puzzle pieces and harmony is created. It's not the idea of becoming homogeneous that creates unity. It's the idea of validating all of the differences that are truly our core differences that are valuable in everyone, so that everyone is the puzzle piece they were made to be. If they try to be a different shape, then they don't fit. But if they're the shape that they were made to be, if they're true to themselves, then it fits with all the other pieces, and we create the big picture that then supports all the pieces. So it's about being true to yourself, knowing yourself, and really living a life of authenticity and not giving over to the fears that bend us out of our true shape.
How to do channeling.
Channeling is really something everyone does in a natural sense. When you're doing what you love to do, when you're in the zone, you are in a channeling state. That state is gamma in the brain, between 40 and 100 cycles per second. So everyone channels when they're doing what they love to do. So I think channeling is the idea of becoming a more natural expression when everyone is truly acting on their passion, which is the first principle of Bashar's formula, because passion is the translation in our body of the message from the higher mind that says, this is who you are. This is the next step on your path. The situation that brings the most excitement, that contains the most passion in it, act on that first, because that's the direction of your true self. That's your compass needle pointing to your true north. So I think everyone will become a channel in the sense that you will become harmonious with yourself, authentic to yourself, and you'll be able to express that in the actions and your behaviors in the world, and everyone will be channeling their authentic self.
What do we misunderstand the law of attraction?
See, that's the secret behind the law of attraction. It's not wrong that you have to be the vibration of a thing you want to attract, but I think a lot of people misunderstand that they have to learn to be that vibration. They don't. That's your natural core frequency. It's coming off all the time, and it's attempting to attract everything you need that will fulfill you. We get in the way with our negative beliefs, our fear-based beliefs. We prevent that vibration from pulling the things to us that we actually need. So it's not that we have to learn to be that vibration. It's that we have to stop interfering with our core vibration. And if we stop doing that, everything we need will flow to us in the way that serves us best.
What is your purpose of life?
To be your true self, to know who you are. It's the ancient phrase, know thyself. It is being authentic and being a living example in service to everyone else as a reflection of what is possible.